Hello and welcome to another episode of MItten Backstage. Thanks so much for joining us today. I am here chatting today with Hannah Truckenbrod. I first met this wonderful jazz singer years ago when I was studying at Western Michigan University. Since I last saw her and since we both have graduated, she has gone on to do a bunch of cool things, including touring for a few years with the Glenn Miller Orchestra. And she also recently was involved in a live performance with Kurt Elling. So she is doing a lot of cool things and is now based in Chicago. But it was great getting to catch up and hear about all that she's been up to since the pandemic started and a lot of her priorities shifted. If you liked today's conversation and you want to support my podcasting efforts, you can head on over to patreon.com/Dr. Snedeker. There you can get early access to podcast episodes, exclusive merch, and more. You can also go to DrSnedeker.com to see everything else that I am up to around the internet. Thanks again for listening, and feel free to share this with someone who you think would enjoy these types of conversations. And don't forget to like, follow, subscribe, any way that you normally interact with an account or platform that you enjoy. Show some love. It shows some love for my algorithm and all that wonderful behind-the-scenes metric stuff that you probably don't want to pay attention to. But it really does help, and I appreciate everyone who takes the time to do it. All right. Let's get into today's episode with Hannah Truckenbrod. A lot of unnecessary stress for the morning, but it was resolved in 10 minutes. So
there you go. It tends to be how it happens.
The ebb and flow.
Yep.
But yeah, how's getting back out there? I mean, 2021, where the doors are opening in places.
I'm not really doing much to put myself out there necessarily.
Sure.
The Kurt gig happened because I had been doing, so I'm pretty well acquainted, professional friends with Brian Farina, who is his sound engineer and manager. And Brian's also a Western alum.
Okay.
And he and his wife Judy are based out in, the Chicago suburbs, but Chicago area. And Judy is a director for the Chicago Children's Choir. So I kind of met her in high school through my own high school choir director. And they're just really lovely people, great to know, great to work with. And Brian had me working on some graphic design and video editing throughout the past year for some things. A lot of Kurt's projects I was working on behind the scenes, and then also doing some stuff for Show Choir Camps of America. They did their virtual camp last year, and then this year as well. It just wrapped up last week, I think. And I've done videos for Chicago Children's Choir as well. So a lot of my stuff has been on the computer for the past year, but Brian hit me up maybe a month or so ago. Well, probably like a month before the actual gig, or maybe a few weeks beforehand, and was like, "Hey, you want to sing backgrounds for Kurt at Ravinia?" And I was like, "Yes."
Yes.
So that was that, and he got us the music. So I'll back up. The project is his new album coming out in October. It's called Super Blue. I actually don't know how much I'm supposed to talk about it, but I'm sure it's fine. I mean, you could already buy it at the shows.
Right.
It's just officially being released on Audition in October. It's called Super Blue. It's a project with Charlie Hunter and his band, Corey Fonville and DJ Harrison. And so It was the four of them at Ravinia playing the record down, basically. And so they called me and then this other girl, Sophia, who's a Chicago local, to sing backgrounds, and got us some music. We did not rehearse. We just showed up, ran the set down at the sound check, and that was that. It was very casual, informal. I don't know if you've been to Ravinia, but it's a gorgeous venue up in the north suburbs of Chicago, in Highland Park. And it's the summer home for the Chicago Symphony Orchestra. So the big main pavilion is where CSO plays most of the summer,
Okay.
and then we were in a smaller pavilion off to the side since they have that residency. And it's a huge lawn. People, it's like a whole culture up in the north suburbs. Like you bring your little like tables. It's more than just like a picnic or anything. Like people bring their tables and their fine china and their candelabras and make like a whole evening of it on the grass, which is super cute. But yeah, so that was that. I wish there was more to tell you, but
No.
like that was the whole thing, and there's supposed to be more dates in the fall. Brian's gonna get back to me about that. They're playing a festival in Brooklyn in October that I might fly out for, and other than that, right now, that was my one gig.
Hey, that's a pretty cool gig.
Yeah,
Well,
yeah, no complaints. Obviously, super grateful, and it was a good time.
yeah, well, and because I love Butcher Brown, so anything that DJ Harrison or Corey Fonville,
Hmm.
all those guys, anything they do, I try to keep tabs on.
Yeah,
Um,
absolutely.
and I've been also loving that they've been getting work. It's not the full Butcher Brown band, but like those dudes are being called to do other session work,
Right.
production, and I've been listening to Nigel Hall's recent record. He just put together this great record that you can feel like how much fun they had doing it.
Hmm.
There's like a lot of cool, soul vibes, throwback Motown.
Yeah, that's the
One of them
best.
sounds like a goofy, almost like 70s game show type
Hmm.
theme. And like so yeah, just seeing when I saw him tagged in a post and someone shared that post and I was like, I think that's Hannah, but I
Yeah, yeah.
don't.
Actually, I was introduced to Butcher Brown through a fundraiser that Kurt did back in December. He did a Blue Holiday, which was a virtual concert event, and it was a fundraiser for the Georgia runoff election. And Butcher Brown did a video for that, and that was my first exposure to them. So yeah, huge fan as well. I think they're really cool.
Yeah, very cool. Well, and it seems like with all the video work you've been doing, is that a recent like you adapted to the changing in what you were doing, or is it always kind of a passion to do that type of stuff?
Yeah, I mean, a little of both. When I was a kid, I was the one who always wanted to make like DVDs of our family vacations and things like that. And I would go into
Ah,
iMovie, or like Windows Movie Maker, actually, is what we use. And just, played around with photos and videos and slapped some music on it and threw the transitions in there. And that was that. But I've always just loved anything creative, which sounds so, cliche, but anything I can like tackle a project and make something and be like, look what I made. But so then this past year in the pandemic, when I was home, well, first of all, as you know, I was on the road with the Glenn Miller Orchestra before COVID hit, and we all
right.
flew home. We were out on the West Coast, actually heading up
Mm.
towards Washington. We were booked for like Oregon and Washington at the end of March, and those got canceled like at the beginning of March because that was kind of like the epicenter of infections. And those started getting canceled. We were like, okay, maybe break will start a little early or whatever. But we were in like Arizona and then California around like the first and second weeks of March. And our last gig was at UCLA on March 11th, that Wednesday. And we flew home March 14th on Saturday from Vegas. And everything had been canceled. In the meantime, we were just like waiting out, like driving to each city, seeing if they were still going to do the show, and then it getting canceled like an hour before call time or
Oof.
something. So uh, I was home. That was my full time job, so I did not have like my own place. So I went home and lived with my parents. And in the meantime, so for the past year, I had been doing social media for the band. In the meantime, the company was like, "Hey, we want you to still like keep posting," which was difficult, obviously, because the band was off payroll and we only had so much like backlogged B-roll content to
Right.
post, and it was hard to ask the guys to like record things at home if they're not getting paid for it, which was everybody's struggle kind of.
Right.
But we decided to work on a virtual performance video, and we did In the Mood, and everybody recorded their parts at home. And I just told them, I was like, hey, everybody's doing this right now. We need to put something out. I'll figure it out. I had never used Premiere Pro before, so that was like my project to learn how to use it, and that's what I did. So starting with that, we worked on some. Well, we started with a smaller one, just with our vocal group. We did Perfidia, just to test the waters and see how it would go, and then we did a full band thing. But yeah, after that, I did some friends, like virtual choirs, like who are high school teachers, just for an end of the year kind of video. I helped out with SCA, like I said. That was a little later on. I was actually in person for show choir camp in a studio quartet, because the director of the camp is based in Naperville, which is very close to where I live. I'm from Aurora, Illinois. And they called some people in the Chicago area who either had been to camp or who knew some of the directors and stuff. And we basically, well, the staff engineered a COVID-safe studio, and we took our temperatures every day and wore masks until we were like in our little plexiglass studios, and we were like the models for the kids watching camp online. And so we just had an SATB quartet, and we did that. But then later on, I edited some footage for Brian, who was working on that camp as well. I helped out with the New York Voices virtual vocal jazz camp through Western as well last summer. Doing video editing for one of the choirs. I did Peter Eldridge's choir, and then I was also moderating the Zoom rooms for camp and all the different classes and stuff. And then, I started doing CCC work this past fall, working on like grids and concert videos for smaller choirs, for all of their virtual like big concert events. And since they're a huge nonprofit, they do I feel like they pulled out all the stops. I thought it was really incredible. I worked on their Black History Month concert and their Canta Latino concert as well this past winter, and I was just like, dang, they got everything. It was very cool, like a whole virtual fundraiser event. So everything's self-taught. I've just been kind of making my services available where I can help. It's fun for me. So I've always enjoyed graphic design and now video design as well. So
I think I share the same sentiment in terms of like always kind of having a passion for creating stuff. Because I remember, when I was a kid, when we went to visit, my uncle who lives in Massachusetts, he would, I don't even remember where we went. I just remember being in the car, and me and my younger cousin, we had a little Fisher Price radio with like a microphone, and we were like improvising a radio show and recording it to tape.
Yep. Oh yeah, I was always trying to put on shows in the backyard and like getting all the kids from the street and like casting them in my musicals and things like that. And I remember parents being like, what does Hannah think she's doing? Like, she's not going to get these kids to perform. Like, they don't want to do this. But I'm an oldest child. I'm a Leo. I liked being in charge and trying to get people to do things. So it was fun times.
Well, and I think too that it speaks to kind of like what a lot of people, people I've talked to on and off the podcast, have been saying, especially in the last year and a half, 2 years, just wanting to have some basic command of like video editing, photo editing, being able to kind of, be multifaceted as a creative, just beyond, playing or beyond, recording, like just having, a chance to, or having, I guess, the workflow and the skills to like, I could put something on Instagram, but I can also make something a little long form with multi cameras, or I can, try using a green screen, or, there's so many skills that kind of feed into like the work you can get, the people you can meet, the stuff you do.
Mm-hmm.
So
for sure. For me, it was always like I have too many interests. It's hard for me to pick one. When I was in like middle school and early high school, I was going to Blue Lake Fine Arts Camp as an art major, and I thought I was going to do visual art as like my thing forever.
Wow.
But I had a really great choir director and choir program at my high school, which kind of fostered my love of singing as like my number one.
Yeah.
So that was what I pursued, and it kind of always just like it came naturally to me. It was the most fun for me, so that was why I kind of focused on that one. But even still, like I think that has been something that the pandemic, obviously not a great thing, but it has been great for, is letting everybody kind of focus on hobbies they may have let fall by the wayside or other things they've always wanted to try for the first time. So I've gotten back into like painting and jewelry making and things like that. I used to do a ton of photography in college, and I kind of let that go because I didn't want to take my DSLR on the road. And pulling that back out has been really joyful for me. So it's those things that you feel like because you either maybe got a college degree in something, or it's the only thing you've been doing for work for a long time, you think you've pigeonholed yourself into one medium or one craft. And you're allowed to call yourself like a visual artist even if you're not selling your art or making money from it or even showing anybody.
Right.
You can still include it as like a part of your identity.
Yeah, and I think that's so true that like people kind of undervalue, you know, uh yeah, like they do something in private and they think like, oh well, I'm not like this guy who's got
Right.
art up in all these galleries. It's like, no, but you're still practicing that craft, and it's
Yeah.
gonna inspire and inform, even if you don't, yeah, even if it's just personal, and not everything has to be monetized. Like I'm guilty of being like, oh, I could start doing, like last year when Pokemon cards were at kind of a boom. I was just like, it might be fun to get back into that hobby, and like maybe I'll make some
Yeah.
content. And now it's just like, oh, I want to, I might do a video here and there, but it's more just trying to get back into the hobby of collecting in general, just different
Yeah.
things that are fun. And
Totally.
I don't need to like try and be these people who are like, I bought a first edition, like an original set, and it's like that's like $50,000. I don't have
Yes.
that kind of money.
Yes. Well, I think I totally agree with you about feeling the need to like make content about everything that you do. I think that has become such a weird precedent over the past few years with especially musicians using specifically Instagram and also YouTube, I think, more so than any other platforms to kind of put themselves out there. And then obviously TikTok now is like a way that musicians specifically are getting discovered and signed. And it I have conversations with people who just love to play the guitar for fun or something like that. And they're like, well, I'm not a real musician like you. And I'm like, you probably play the guitar better than me. Like,
Yeah.
and just because you didn't ever take a lesson or something like that, it doesn't mean that you're not a musician. And, that I have to give myself the same grace for like the other things that I love in my life. So,
Right. And it's, those type of people too, it's like you don't want to come across like, listing your, training or, some of the fun stuff you've done in your career.
yeah.
It's like you don't want to sound too comparative of like no, this is what a real musician looks like. It's like, that's what causes some people to leave their, opportunities they've started to like,
Yeah.
overextend themselves and their finances in a city that like is not serving what they want to do.
Right.
And yeah, it's like more damaging to be like, no, you only have to do art full time, and you have to feel hunger and pain, and like the negatives inform the positive output. And it's like, no.
That's so awesome that you bring that up. I'm actually reading this book called Real Artists Don't Starve.
Whoa.
It's by Jeff Goins, and I'm about a third of the way through it right now. But he basically talks a lot about career changers, people who realized that they were in one path and then they wanted to pursue an artistic passion, and then they end up making that like their full-time career, their full-time moneymaker. Um, but then he also talks about how like if you are suffering in other areas of your life, it's not going to necessarily serve your art. And we hear a lot of stories about, you know, the greats who did suffer or had issues like substance abuse, or they had, you know, they were super lonely and didn't have like social connections, or maybe they ended their own lives, like their mental health wasn't in the best place. And
Right.
it makes you wonder, at what cost? At what cost do you get to pursue your art and be great? And what do you have to sacrifice? And so he makes a great argument in this book about how you don't have to do that, and you might actually serve your art better if it's not making you starve.
Right. and,
um,
and like I talk about this a lot with people who, you know, either they ask me about like, oh, what was jazz school like, or like, you know,
mhm.
other just talking about jazz, and how so many artists that are like in the history books that developed the art form that, you know, shaped it into what it is now, they all had some sort, you know, like, oh, they died young, they, you know, they
Mm.
had this addiction, they abused people, they, you know,
Yeah.
did this and this and this. And like, I feel like it's important to acknowledge that, you know, like someone like Miles Davis, like, yes, he, you know, every few years he's just like, I'm gonna change everything, and then he did it, and he wore crazy clothes, and, you know, he's got a million different points of reference for his playing and artistry. But then, you know, those things in the nooks and crannies of like how he was as a person, how he interacted with women, you know, and it's all nuanced. And I think nuance is like a big thing, especially now. It's, you know, social media, everyone else trying to put their best foot forward, you know, like,
Right.
you don't see the 30 takes it took to get that lick down. You see the lick in one take in a 15-second reel, and then you
Right.
think, oh, he probably just set up his phone and bam, and it's like, you know,
No.
nope.
And you start to realize that when you're practicing and you're like, oh, I want to put this, you know, this chunk or this verse or whatever on Instagram, and you've recorded it 10 times and you've hated every single take, and you're just like, well, damn, there goes like an hour of my life. Like, I didn't think it was going to take this long or something like that. And it makes you think, like, oh, those people probably had the same experience, you know? So it
Right.
is something that it takes time. Nothing just comes like that to anybody. And that's maybe a downfall of social media, is making us feel like they that just took them a few seconds. Or, you know, even outside of music, a downfall of social media is just displaying the good stuff, is just displaying the wins.
Yep.
And so, you know, that's something I am always working on remembering, like, oh, they bought a house, wow, good for them, life must be so easy for them, or something like
Right.
that. And meanwhile, no, they probably worked really really hard and had to have like support from a family member or something, especially if they're young, like our generation, like who's buying houses right now. So, you
Yeah.
know, there's always more to the story that doesn't get shared.
Right. Yeah. Especially funny thinking about, you know, house talk. I was at my friend's wedding, and that was a lot of the icebreaker conversations. It's just, you know, people talking about the Grand Rapids housing market right now. And it's like,
Mm,
it was either like, I'm glad that I got in before the market went up. I'm glad I own a house during this market because I'm looking to sell.
yeah.
Or, you know, I've offered 30K over the asking and they still won't, you know, someone else will bid 50. And meanwhile, I'm just like, cool, I rent.
Yes.
Uh, so
And
that's my house
I foresee
experience.
myself renting for a very long time. Yeah, no, I
Yeah.
get that
But it
for sure.
is it is definitely like, you know, I try not to get caught up in, you know, especially as I dig more and more into like social media tools and, you know, understanding these metrics, and not trying to obsess over them, but trying to see the trends as, you know, informing some of my decisions. And not
Yep.
even purely like, I don't want to be that guy that turns into like, oh, people like it when I do this one thing. I'm only going to post about that, because that's
Right.
not, it doesn't make sense to who I am as an
Or
artist.
this is gonna, this is gonna win the algorithm. This is gonna get shown to the most people, or things like that.
Right. And there's some guarantee if you have like if you're like The Rock, it's like, okay, all of my posts are going to get 20,000 likes at
Yeah.
least.
Yeah.
But that doesn't mean he's only, searching, or his team. He's not doing it. He's so
Right.
busy. It's not like his team is, they're thinking about how to go viral, but everyone, they already have a likable person. So it's, it kind of, it's a model that's like, okay, if you're, endearing, honest, transparent, there's room for growth in just that general aspect, rather than trying to, find the pulse of the algorithm every few weeks.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. That was something that I struggled with when I was doing social media for the band, um, because I was obviously running my own social media, and for kind of like half a year prior to taking over the band accounts, a lot of that was like promoting my album, which I did all by myself. Like it was not like a huge thing. I didn't have a label
Right.
putting anything out there or whatever. But like in my own network and community, like I was doing that promotion, and I had fun with it. And it was like I got to make all the rules. Obviously, I didn't care like if stuff didn't work, because it was my own fault, and like we just keep trying, and it's still like my personal account in a way, even though I am like a brand now as an artist too. But yeah, it was fun. I would do like stories every week about where I was going to be, because I was obviously traveling. And so, like, if I had people in wherever we were going to be going, I would love to invite them to the shows or catch up with them for coffee or whatever. And so the management came to me when the guy who was doing social media was about to leave the band. And they're like, hey, we want you to take over. We want you to run it like you do your personal stuff. I'm like, okay, yeah, cool. That's a lot of work, though. And they did not have a huge budget for social media.
They never do.
And um, it's probably even less than you're thinking. It was pennies.
Yeah.
But I was like, okay, if you and their goals for being on social media was to obtain a younger audience. Obviously, the Glenn Miller fan base is um, trickling. The numbers are dwindling, and they want to stay relevant. So there's obviously a really great vintage community that of like people our age in their 20s and 30s, and they're so fun. And when I would get to meet like those few young people at shows, they'd be like, this is the coolest thing ever. I can't believe I'm seeing you guys play, things like that, obviously. Whereas like, older people would be at the shows, they'd be like, I heard Glenn Miller play in Paris when I was in the war, and things like that. And it's like, oh, like the real guy. But
right.
Anyway, they wanted to stay relevant. That was their reasoning for being on Instagram. And I was like, okay, well, the way that we reach people is we put certain tags on our posts, and people who are following those tags, like World War II or big band or like very broad things like that, want to see Glenn Miller pop up in that culture. And then we have to go and like find the people who follow those and maybe comment on their posts, and then like, share other things from other groups who are doing the same sort of stuff, and other vintage music performing groups. And I was like, that takes a lot of time. Mm-hmm. And to them, they were like, well, you're just sitting on the bus. You could just do it while you're on the bus, right?
Nope.
I see your logic, but I could also be sleeping on the bus.
Yeah, I could also be.
So it's hard. It's hard to. I think still, even now that social media is so prevalent and such a cornerstone of PR and marketing, it's still hard for people to understand how much time should be given to it, how much money should be funneled into it, and how that affects the people who are operating its well-being. Because I was talking to a friend who was working full-time doing social media for Chaco's, like the shoe brand, the outdoors brand.
Okay.
which was huge. And he was like, I don't get a vacation. Even when I'm on vacation, I have to be like checking posts and making sure that the stuff that I scheduled out is performing well and replying to comments in real time and answering DMs. And I'm like, that's not a vacation. And that's hard. And so I'm kind of rambling now, but it totally changed for me when it went from something fun for myself and my own brand, essentially, just like me as a person, to doing it for an organization. Because where are those guidelines? I don't know if there's necessarily still that guidebook for performing ensembles running social media necessarily. I'm sure people maybe who listen to this are going to be like, oh, actually, I do that and I do know all the rules, and I'd love to hear it, but
right, yeah. Yeah.
When you're figuring it out by yourself and you have no background in it, it's just kind of like, okay, we just we do a lot of Googling and we find what sticks.
Right. Yeah, it's such a different beast having to do someone else's social media when it's not tied to like your, like in some aspects it can be tied to what you focus on as an artist, but
Yeah.
it's there's usually like some sort of rule, like unspoken, like, oh wait, we didn't want you to post that. It's like, well, no one told me not to, so
Right.
why? Okay.
That's
But
another thing.
yeah.
I've seen friends who also do social media for different organizations. It's like you're hiring a social media coordinator. Aren't you trusting them that they know what's gonna like perform well? Shouldn't you just hand over that responsibility? I guess there's a lot of those stories where I feel like people are posting what they know is going to do well or what they think the community is going to respond to, and then management being like, no, that's not it. And it's like, okay, well,
It's like, well, then you do it.
yeah, you do it.
Like with peace and love, you do it.
Mm-hmm.
But and I think of like, you know, it reminded me of two things, both born out of YouTube. One was observing this tech YouTuber, one of the big, I want to say he's in the top 10. He's probably one of the big 3 tech creators, like Linus Tech Tips, Austin Evans, and then this guy, Marquise Brownlee. Marquise just did a studio tour showing like, okay, here we bought this building, here's all the sets, here's all, the staff, and he's got people who, it's like, this guy is just focused on Discord, like that's his job. He handles the Discord community, he knows the platform really well, he knows how to keep people engaged, he knows how to make things fun that feeds into the rest of the company. And so many people are like, well, we just want, like, hey, you're a server at this restaurant, can you also be the social media manager? It's like, but that's not like, that's so much more work. Like, yes, like the idea is always like, well, she's more on the floor, she knows the customer, she's got a good idea of the restaurant, she's been here a while, or or he's been here a while, and like they just assume, they being employment, it's like, well, I don't really spend a lot of time on social media, so she shouldn't have to spend a lot of time on social media with this job. It's like, no, you got to find someone who's like really, that's like a passion, but also understanding that they need the space to develop an audience, develop a voice for the platform, develop all these things that because I think about like I know I need to up my game a little bit with Third Coast's recording companies posting, and when I kind of was assigned that role, it was kind of like, oh, the last post they had done was like a month ago, so they were just happy to have anything sooner than a month. And now it's like we were saying, it's so tied to the PR of a business now that you have to ride that line between feeling like a company but also feeling personable, but also and it reminded me of one of the YouTube Rewind videos they did. I think one of the lowest performing ones, and it performed so low because it was like a company just kind of cherry picked, like, oh, Will Smith's on YouTube, and it's like, well, yeah, but YouTube's also where like people in their bedrooms get famous, so like let's highlight some of those people who are like actually in the trenches instead of someone like Will Smith, who, yes, he's charismatic. Yes, he knows how to be on camera. Yes, he's a talent. He's great, but he's also got a team. He's got all these experts just crunching the numbers, and he's paying a staff. Like,
Right.
that's a little bit different of an integration. Whereas someone like Jack Black, I feel like did a great job endearing himself to YouTube because he's already a personality, and he let his like 12-year-old son be the producer. So he knows how to edit graphics, he knows how to do jump cuts. He knows how to, he's like, Dad, do this. And Jack Black's, knows how to take directions. So it just was a fun moment of synergy where he didn't feel like a celebrity, even though he's a celebrity. And I think more people can learn, not saying give all your social media content to your nephew, but just like,
well, I
understand
think,
it. Yeah.
Totally. There's something to be said for the average Joe having the power to market it's a whole new element to small business, right? And that goes for artists and musicians as well. You have all of the tools at your fingertips to propel your career forward, whereas maybe 50 years ago people couldn't do that except for maybe on a very local scale by word of mouth. And so now you have the entire world at your fingertips, and it's almost like a game of catch up where, like, if you don't have social media as an artist, you're never going to have a career, really. Even if you're with a label, or if you're with management or a talent agency or whatever, like, people are using social media as a resume now, and they're using it as customer service, and that was something I realized with GMO, was like, people would DM me about like their tickets, and I'm like, I don't do that, that's the venue. But like, you still have to be able to manage people using that platform. And it's become so many different things. I think it became that before the general public was ready for it, and that's why it's almost like an unfair advantage if you were on it 10 years ago figuring it out. I hear about that with a lot of just like basic influencers who started out as maybe bloggers or YouTubers in like the early 2010s, and now they have a huge following, and maybe they're like TV hosts, or they have other amazing projects, and they started on social media, they started on YouTube, things like that, because they just dove into that. It was such a niche time period, and if you missed it, you missed it.
Yes, it's definitely like interesting to see just how dialed in some people are with just kind of the ebb and flow of like, all right, I put out content, it might be sponsored, I have to hit these metrics, and then okay, like someone like Mr. Beast, who like, every video has to hit a certain metric because he spends so much money on these spectacles. And then against that audience, he knows he probably has like a margin of like, all right, 10 to 20% of every viewed video, some people buy merch. And it's like, it's interesting having viewership, because a person who sees like 1 million views, they're like, wow, 1 million views, like they must be loaded. And it's like, well, they might have made a couple thousand off the AdSense, but they might have sold merch if they had a merch store. Like, there's so many factors that go into what success looks like or feels like. So
I think I was trying to think about like the first artist that I can remember watching who blew up because of YouTube, and not like, I mean, I guess people think about Justin Bieber a lot in that way, but I was thinking about Scott Bradley and Postmodern Jukebox, how that was a more like a left of center kind of project, but it was so niche and people loved it, and those videos went viral, and now they have multiple, well, before COVID, they had multiple world tours going on, with so many different performers and hosts, and pulling people from different like jazz and vintage and dance and pop communities all to come together for these variety shows, essentially under Scott Bradley's brand, which is pop songs with a vintage twist. And they did it so well because they just, and I don't know anything about the background of it, but I've, met a few people who have worked with them, and it's huge now, and they started on YouTube.
Yeah, and it's funny because I don't know if it's directly related to them, but they're definitely like an example where so many tips for like people starting on YouTube as musicians include try doing a song in a style that's not like the original song, and
Yeah, covers.
it's like I've seen that with the couch covers people,
Yep.
and I've Scary Pockets,
Mm-hmm.
just all these people they've carved out like, all right, I'm gonna do pop songs but like this, or you know recognizable songs with a twist,
Yeah.
and I think of even super creative bands like Nowhere. uh they, some of their first big videos were, their Daft Punk and their, some of their other covers with how
Yeah,
they do their videos and stuff too.
totally.
So it's not a crazy idea. It's funny that like people are constantly having to adapt their advice for these platforms too.
So true.
Be like, I didn't know, vintage versions of pop songs would go viral, but now that I
Right.
do, I'm going to recommend everyone try to.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, it's an interesting landscape right now for musicians.
It moves so fast too, and like the nature of trends, um, and that's something else that's like super prevalent on TikTok right now, is that if you miss a trend, you miss a trend. It's over in like 3 days, and if you do it like a week or two later, it's like, where have you been? Like, we're on to something else now.
Yeah.
Um, and I even see that in like in the music TikTok community as well. Uh, the one that stands out to me is Sammy Ray made a Dancing Queen challenge, and you had to sing her lick of Dancing Queen in one breath. And she was not expecting it to go viral, but it did. And now so many more people follow her and follow her band and love her music, all because she got something viral on TikTok. It's a huge tool, but it's also like it's momentary. It's gone like that. And if it doesn't
Yeah.
catch on, it doesn't catch on.
Yeah. It's like, it's almost like, TikTok feels like, like online window shopping. and
Mm,
and there's so many, like it's like when you go to those shopping districts and you're just like, oh, that's kind of cool. Oh, that's cool. Whoa. And then that pulls you into the store, and then
yep,
suddenly you're like a more of a fan or invested. And
yep.
it's it's interesting like how people can just churn it out and still like keep a level of consistency and like passion and drive behind it all too. I
Yeah.
feel like I have to like, space things out, like, with this podcasting, it's like, oh, I could do a lot of stuff ahead of time. It gives me room during my weekdays to, work on other skills and things. But then some things are very much in the moment, and then, platforms are like, oh, Facebook owns Facebook and Instagram, but both platforms operate differently, and scheduling still like it works, but they want you to post organically, but they have the
Yeah.
cross posting feature, but they don't want you to use it. But if you use it, it's easy. It's like just a
Yeah, I hear you. Totally.
yeah. But yeah, it's cool that you're I don't know, able to like still like, even with video work, it's still related to like things you enjoy about singing and performing and music and
Oh yeah.
stuff.
Absolutely. My favorite thing about putting these choir videos together over the past year is hearing things stack up and hearing things line up and seeing them visually as well. And I could be video editing anything, but if I'm going to be doing something, I love that it's a group of singers.
Yeah.
And I get to hear all of their individual voices and then what they sound like together, and, you know, making it look visually how I like it to be. But obviously, I'm not working on the audio most of the time. I'm putting in a master that somebody else worked on. So then, like, putting that on top and getting to see it all come together is very satisfying for me.
Yeah. Yeah, there's something like, I feel like until you start video editing, you don't realize this feeling of like seeing a million different like clips and trims, and you're moving and syncing and all
Yeah.
this stuff. And then when, you know, it takes 2 hours to render or however long to render, and
Right.
and then, you know, you're like, I have this one video file and it's all done.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, so much going on behind those little 3-4 minute videos we all watch.
Yeah.
For
um
sure.
so you mentioned, I mean, I heard your first album. Has that been a fun thing to explore, or has touring taken kind of your focus from like doing the little gigs of like, here's my stuff, just because it's so much time and
Um,
energy?
yeah, I mean, when I was with Glenn Miller, that was it. That was my full-time gig. We were doing at least 4 or 5 shows a week,
Wow.
and we were on the road 45 to 48 weeks out of the year. And every once in a while, some of the guys would get like one-off sessions in a town where they might know somebody or whatever. They might go out to jams and stuff, but I was typically more resigned to just chill. um, it was a lot of energy, to say the least, and I was starting to burn out around the beginning of 2020 anyway, and I was thinking about moving on to my next thing. So COVID just kind of forced me to do that like a couple months earlier than I had planned to. And when the album came out, I was sending it to radio stations and publications in like the Midwest, kind of just like the Great Lakes area, since I went to school in Michigan and I live in Chicago. And that was cool. And I'd have like family members reach out to me and be like, I just heard you on WCB or Blue Lake Radio or whatever. But other than that, I wasn't doing a whole lot of promoting in person, and I didn't do like a release show or anything like that. Um, the the purpose of recording the album really was to sell the physical discs on the road with the band, and that was why it ended up being the tunes and arrangements that I did. It kind of had to be in the same Great American Songbook vein as the band in order to sell it out there, and uh, it did really well on the road, which I was grateful for, and it was part of the reason that I stayed with the band as long as I did as well, just because a girl's got student loans.
Yeah, gotta get
um,
the loans.
Yep. So I was so grateful for the reception that it had from the fans, though. I had a lot of people messaging me on my website and Facebook saying, like, I've been following the Glenn Miller Orchestra for years, and I bought your CD at the last show, and I love it so much. It's great to hear you and can't wait to see what else you do. And very kind people, saying things like that. But yeah, other than that, that's basically the extent of that project in general. And now I have, because I had just reordered a bunch of CDs in February 2020, I have like hundreds of discs sitting in my apartment that I'm just never going to sell. But if anybody's listening to this, it's on my website.
Yeah, that's what happened to our vinyl for Earth Radio's second
Yeah.
album. We bought, because it was like, I think it was like 2,200 from Furnace Records to get 300, and then it was 2,400 to get 500.
Yeah,
I think.
they do that, where it's like it just economically makes more sense to get 1,000 instead of 500.
Yep.
It goes from like, maybe $2.50, $3 a disc to like less than $1 a disc or something. I remember. Yeah, and I'll never forget. I got them sent to a hotel in Boulder end of February, and I had like 7 or 8 heavy boxes of CDs, and we did everything in one bus. So we all had. Oh no, I'm frozen. I don't know if you can hear me.
Oh,
Okay.
There you are.
Cool, I'm back. Sorry about that. So everything is in-house on the bus. We have all of our gear under the bus. We have all of our luggage under the bus. And then we've got all of the guys' suit jackets, my wardrobe closet, and then like all of the merch, band merch, including myself and the male singers' CDs as well. And so we had T-shirts and CDs for the band. And hats as well. And so I was on the merchandise sales team as well with another gentleman, and part of my side gig then was to count merch and sell at intermission and after the shows, which was also great because that's one of the best opportunities to talk to the audience. And they see your face, and they get to ask you questions and tell you all their feedback, which I didn't think about, but my other friends who were on like setup crew or things like that, they were like, oh yeah, we'll get like one or two random people come up to the stage afterwards, but like everybody goes out to the table. Also because that's where the band leader would be, and they mostly want to talk to him. But yeah. Anyway, I'll never forget, it was snowing in Boulder, and I had all these boxes of CDs delivered to the hotel, and I had to lug them out to the bus and get them in the closet. And 2 weeks later we're flying home, and that was interesting too because we left everything on the bus. We did not know how long it was going to be, obviously, before we came back, and the bus went back to the depot in Connecticut. So mid-June, my mom and I took a road trip out to, or maybe early June, took a road trip out to Connecticut, which was also, it was definitely early June because it was in the midst of still heavy protests for George Floyd.
Oh,
and
right.
Where is Yale? New Haven. We stopped in New Haven to stay the night before driving back the next day. And there was a protest finishing up that day, and in the midst of COVID, obviously, and everything, we were like, what is this world that we're living in right now? And I'm just driving halfway across the country to go get my belongings off of a tour bus. Like, so crazy.
So many things.
So many things. Yeah, that's my whole life was on that bus,
Yeah.
For a while. My 2 years of my life, just left it.
Yeah, that I didn't know it was. I mean, I knew it was a busy schedule, like 4 to 5 gigs. Are you doing like? Are they all like? They can't all be the same. I'm thinking like, in my head, like, okay, weekdays, like school visits or like community center, like.
It was the run of the gamut. So one of the things that the band prided themselves on was being the still most consistently touring band and like the highest volume of shows, I guess.
It's a lot
of that kind. Since 1956, they'd been doing it since 1956 when the band was reformed, like in Glenn's name with a lot of the original members, and just ever since, like when somebody would leave, they'd replace it, and the company's just been keeping it going.
Wow.
So yeah, I mean, some of them were, and in order to keep that schedule so full and to keep us on the road for so long, they would just take whatever they could get. So we had a promoter who did like the giant symphony halls and performing arts centers in the major cities, and those were awesome. And then we did a lot of high schools. And like, the high school band would come up at the end and play In the Mood with us, and that was cute. And but it was fascinating to see the different ways that audience members like regarded and revered the band. Some people being lifelong fans and being like, I've met every band leader, and I've met so many, and like some fans who became friends, and some of the lifers on the band who'd been there for 20 years, give or take, just like become friends with the fans who have been following the band for so many years because they just keep seeing them. And that was cool. We've done trailer parks, we've done campsites, and then we would go to Japan for a month every year, which was really cool. They'd been doing that for, I don't even know how long at this point, maybe since the 60s or 70s, every year to Japan. And they treated us like kings over there.
They have a strong love for like I had a friend who studied in Japan for, like a semester or two. And he was just saying like the level of detail that goes into like representing American jazz in in its classic form, or even just performance in general. I could see why like the Glenn Miller Orchestra coming over, they'd be like, yes, this is what we all trained for.
Well, and it's a totally different performance experience as well. Like in the States, it's very patriotic. Glenn Miller is Americana, and the fan base is hooping and hollering for all their favorite songs and all of that. And it's a much more, I think, casual listening environment, even in
Mhm.
like the bigger symphony halls and stuff. But in Japan, it is dead silent. They are so respectful of the entire
Wow.
performance. Um, we change a lot of the speeches in between songs, obviously, because um, most of the audience doesn't speak English. So, oddly, and even in like major cities like Tokyo or Osaka, um, it was kind of a gamble about what we would talk about, I guess, talking about like the arrangers and the tunes and stuff. So yeah, it was so fascinating, and audience members would bring us gifts, um,
Whoa.
sometimes like treats for the whole band kind of and like people who had never seen us or known us or anything, and then we also had friends who were lifelong fans in Japan as well, which was so cool. But it was a totally different experience, and I have a childhood best friend who I'm still close with today, who was born in Japan but moved to the States when she was 1 or 2. And she was like, I've been to Japan to visit family like so many times throughout my life, and you have seen Japan in ways that I will never see it because of the way that they revere music like that and the music that you're performing. And I'd never thought about that. It's like, wow. It was really cool. It was really cool.
Wow. Yeah, that's I I imagine it's like I don't know if it's just like a I feel like you mentioned respectful. It's like they understand the almost like they understand the importance of the history of the group, but then also like just kind of understanding like from bands like this, from all these older ensembles that are still represented nowadays. It's so much music has developed and
Mm.
come out of the success of different jazz presentations.
Right.
So it, yeah, it's cool that there's like you go you go knowing that there's going to be like this different level of respect. Not saying that American audience don't respect it, because obviously
It's just
people love
different.
it.
Yeah,
Yeah, it's just a
exactly.
different flavor of
Yeah,
audience.
the audience was, I would compare it to like going to see a symphony orchestra. Like they're so quiet through the whole thing. Sometimes they don't even clap between songs. I guess it depended. Usually, actually no, they usually clapped between songs. Um, but it was just clapping, no vocal hooting and hollering or anything, like no whistling, anything like that. Um, just so much, so different.
Yeah, very inward expression of but
Yes.
still super appreciative. And what and it reminded me of some of the discussions that we've been having in Earth Radio of how to present what we do in different audience stuff. So like
Yeah.
if we had a week this month where we did uh what was it, Berlin Sprague Fest, this restaurant Berlin Sprague moved to a new location downtown, and
Hmm.
the city had kind of made this like a beach vibe, like commons area where a lot of people could hang out, and there's like a
That's
social
cool.
zone. So it was like, okay, we played this kind of like beach vibe outdoor downtown thing where a lot of people could just kind of stumble in. And
Mm.
then on Tuesday we played up US 31 in Montague for the band shell. And it's like, okay, that's a built-in audience. People are there, they set up their chairs in the morning and then come
Right.
back, and it's this dedicated audience of like the community and some of the people who are there for the summer. And then uh you know 2 days later we were back in Muskegon playing our monthly residency at Rake Beer Project,
Hmm.
and we had probably like 10 people who came to all three things, and then we saw this smattering of like different people who like found us by accident, happened to be
Yeah.
there because they're dedicated to the series. Like it's like you never know until you
Yeah.
like puts your art in different contexts, like how people receive
Totally.
it.
Yeah, it's so true. And the different types of fans that we met, obviously different situation too, but like different fans that we met, maybe they were just like vintage enthusiasts and they were more about like the cosplaying and dressing up and like going to maybe World War II reenactments or whatever. Because I don't know if you know this, but Glenn Miller was the head of the Army Air Force Orchestra in World War II.
Oh, okay.
So he has very strong ties, and his music has very strong ties to World War II. And he went missing during the war. His plane went down over the English Channel. So then you get the conspiracy theorists as well saying that he never actually died then. But those are a very different breed of fan. And there is, like you said, so much history that goes along with being a fan of this music, depending on your age, basically, and how much you've grown up with it or how much you've studied it. I mean, even when I got the gig, I didn't realize it was a thing. And we don't really, at least at Western in music history, in jazz history, we didn't touch on Glenn Miller hardly at all. But there is a whole other sect of the population who loved and revered him and as a band leader and his music. But like we were talking about the different venues where you play, it also played into the way that people treated us, like how people treated us at a trailer park versus how people treated us at like a symphony hall. It was so different.
Very different.
And it affected what we wore, more so me than the guys. Like the guys had two outfits, either the suit and tie or they had like polos for like hotter outdoor gigs. But I had all kinds of different dresses, and I felt like it was really just like on me as the only woman to decide, okay, what's the vibe of this show? Like, am I wearing a sundress? Am I wearing a ball gown? I don't know. You know, and that was that thing too. I learned maybe too much about how people perceive female vocalists. And, you know, people who feel they are in the place to pass judgment on what you're wearing and how you look, and whether they're allowed to say certain things to you or touch you and stuff like that.
Older fan base.
Not fun. Yeah, exactly. I mean, I'd have guys come up, old guys. I'll never forget in like my first or second week, some old guy with his adult daughter came up for like an autograph and a picture at the end, and he was like, give me a kiss for the picture. And I was like, I don't do that. That's not my job. And like right off the bat, I was like, mm-mm. And I looked at his daughter and she was like, yeah, sorry. Like not even telling him like, Dad, what are you doing? Or like, Dad, apologize. That's not cool.
Him.
Yeah, no, she's just like, oops. Like, okay.
Oop, you met my dad.
Right, exactly. And I was like, no, actually, I think we should leave room for Jesus in this photo. So. Oh man, but yeah, you know, that was a huge element of the gig that I guess it wasn't unexpected, but you don't know how to navigate it until you've done it, and definitely a little wake-up call.
Yeah, it's such a, I don't know, that I think about that too with, you know, I obviously as a guy, I get away with, you know, most of my gigs in the summer, I could just literally have this shirt on and shorts, and you know, everyone, you know, Caleb Elzinga might be like, don't wear shorts, and I'm like, I'm fine wearing shorts. I'm seated. It's like, maybe you don't like wearing shorts. Like I've never seen you in shorts. Maybe when we were swimming. It's like that. Maybe that's a you. No. But I think of like, because with Hannah in our Earth Radio, she, you know, I gig with her in that band, and then I'll gig with her in Blue Water Kings, and I'll see those differences in like, you know, how she, like for Earth Radio, she dresses, you know, super creatively, you know, whatever combination of things she wants to throw together, and it's cool. And then, you know, just having to kind of have the polish, like, well, the dress or the, you know, very, very like cookie cutter, like this is what a professional should wear. Yeah. But, you know, it doesn't matter what she has on, someone's gonna, you know, approach and just not know how to speak like a normal person. And it's just watching it in real time, and you're like, ugh, this is not, no. Because she also is at the merch booth after shows. Right. It's, you know, you get those comments, and some, it's funny because like some people, even if they, I feel like most people who are, you know, an older crowd, they have young people in their life
Yeah.
that you'd think they'd observe some of their, you know, how they speak and what they're talking about.
Hmm.
A lot of people bring up, you know, mental health, or like, you know, not, don't be a creep, or don't,
Yeah.
you know, like respect people's, you know, privacy and space, and yet they're just kind of like, they go into autopilot of like, well, this is what I said to get my wife in the 50s.
Yes.
You're like,
Yes.
but this
It's
isn't your
fascinating.
wife.
Yeah. I find, there were things that I loved about um, being perceived on the band, which was like I had a ton of fun exploring vintage fashion and beauty. And
Yeah.
so I like throughout my 2 years, I experimented with so many different ways to do my hair, figuring out rollers and pin curls and stuff. And basically after my first summer, I was doing it heatless, like just doing rollers or pin curls, which was great. And my hair was so healthy because of that. But people like I would have women come up to me and it would be like a bonding experience, and they'd be like, oh my god, I love your makeup, or I love your hair, how do you do your hair like that, things like that. And those were the moments that made me so excited and happy. And so like I tried to really reconcile and balance like the good with the bad,
Mhm.
or with shopping, like thrift shopping. Being in so many different cities all over the country, I was always looking for like a cool new dress or jewelry or shoes or accessories, whatever, to add to my gigging wardrobe. Because I started on the band with two dresses, and they were both like evening gowns, and I just had two different colors to alternate because the guys have two different suits and ties. And by the time I left the band, I think I had 8 or 9 different dresses. But it was also because we got through. Actually, no, I started with three. I did have a short dress for outdoor gigs. Um, but yeah, as I progressed along my time with them, realizing the different venues and situations, there would be different um, different dress codes, I guess, that would make me feel more comfortable, or just literally adding variety to my life.
Yeah.
Because, oh, and I think you were starting to ask this about whether it was the same show every night. Or maybe you were just talking about venues, but like it was essentially the same show every night. We just kind of rotated different charts. We would play like the hits,
Gotta play the hits.
Pennsylvania 6 5000, String of Pearls, Moonlight Serenade, American Patrol, all of those would be in the show every night because people come to hear those. And then interspersed, and like the songs that I would sing for my solos, and then some of the group tunes as well, because we would have a moonlight. We were called the Moonlight Serenaders, which is a take on the Modern Airs, and which was Glenn's vocal group. A couple of guys from the band would walk out, and we'd have basically 5-part vocal group. Those would kind of rotate every night, so we would get variety through that. But then like you're playing the hits every night, which I don't sing any of the hits, well, except for Chattanooga Choo Choo. I would
Yep.
sing that every night. But yeah. And it was amazing. Our lead clarinet player, who was one of the guys who's been doing it for over 20 years, he never missed a note ever. Like,
Oh,
there are
like this
people
is
who
me.
just, yeah, like that was his identity, and he was so good. He just, everything was the same inflection every night, perfect.
Wow.
Incredible.
There's something to be said for, you know, be, and in jazz we're always like, transcribe this and that. Hey, have you listened to this album that was, a B-side from a basement session in the 60s?
Yeah.
Like, this one's killing. And so, there's something to be said for people who, they transcribe something and they learn and they adapt it to their own vocabulary. And then there's the other side where you're recreating that moment in a way that it's so clean that it's almost like it transcends just being like, oh, he's just like, no original ideas, he's just copying. It transcends that a little bit to get to like, oh, he's so good at this type of work, and
Right.
his instrument by proxy, to be able to like accurately recreate something that was probably just the spur of the moment. It was just an improvised thing.
Yeah. Yeah, and I mean, Glenn Miller's reed section is sort of iconic in the big band world, being topped with a clarinet, obviously.
Mhm.
The Glenn Miller reed sound is something that the band leader would talk about every night in the show, and that was kind of like a little history lesson that he would throw in there. But it's difficult. It is difficult to get that section to play in the style and in tune,
Oof.
especially with the heavy vibrato. So I mean, you're doing it every night. Obviously, if you're not kind of getting it after the however many shows you're on for, then it's like, okay, well, why aren't how do we fit you in? Why isn't this working? But yeah, and that was the other thing too. Obviously, we're all kind of playing these roles, so to say. We were actually on acting modeling contracts. We weren't on musician contracts,
Oh,
and they said they were casting the band as it was in the day of
casting.
Glenn, which traditionally was young, white, straight presenting males and one young white female singer. And that was that for a while. They've had people of color in the band over the past few decades, but it is never a very diverse environment.
Right.
And they still do not hire women as
Wow.
instrumentalists, or they did not at the time that I was pushing for that. And there were so many different excuses given. Uh,
It's our heritage.
Sure. I mean, even down to like the logistics of things where they were like, well, if we had another girl in the band, you'd need a roommate. You would have to live with her. And one of your perks as a singer is you get your own room. I'm like, I'm begging you for a roommate. I'm begging for any female energy in this environment.
Surrounded by all these men.
Yeah, exactly. Because it was a perk that I got my own room. That was nice, and I was reimbursed by the company for half of my hotel rooms when we had to pay for them. When we had to pay for them, and you know, whatever. Other guys had a roommate, and I did like. There were moments where I envied that relationship that some of the guys who got lucky and became very good friends with their roommates and had a good situation there. Obviously, it was very nice being the only woman to have kind of a privacy and like a respite from it by having my own hotel room. But
Yeah.
at the end of the day, I literally I told them so many times, I was like, this band's social dynamic would be so much stronger if there were women here. This would be a better educational experience when we go to high schools, because I've literally had students come up to me and say, why is there only one black guy? Why aren't there any girl instrumentalists? Kids are smart. Kids recognize
Yep.
these things, and student musicians want to see themselves represented on stage.
Yes.
So obviously
Uh,
that didn't really align with my values and the things that I um, think are really important in my musical career, in my educational career, however it unfolds for the rest of my life. But that was a part of the reason that I was starting to get burnt out.
yeah. Well, and it you saying that kids are perceptive. They have
Yes.
a perceptive perspective. Um, it's so true that it's like people bring in high schools bring in entertainment. When I worked at Allendale High School,
Hmm.
they bring in vocal groups, and you'd see choir, ensembles perform, or bands or whatever. And kids want to see the not only like themselves represented. I think also like they want to feel like the values that they're trying to push in their social settings are being understood and
Yes.
developed for just a general cultural shift.
Yeah.
Because yeah, it's like, why not have a mixed race, mixed gender, just this tapestry of like, this is what modern music looks like. And I
Hmm.
get we're preserving this tradition, but at the same time, there are plenty of options that aren't just like, okay, 10 guys from Chicago, 10 guys from New York, 10 guys from just kind of sourcing like the same types of people. And it's not to you know, like I feel like when those conversations of inclusion come up, then they start going like, well, then who would we have to fire to like make room to, and it's like, well,
We have turnover on the band every year.
yeah.
Like, and that's what I would say. I would say make it an initiative to fill the open seats with a woman or another person of color, preferably a woman of color. Like, it's not hard. And their response would be, we just don't have those people auditioning, or they're never the best candidate.
Right.
To which I say, you're not trying hard enough. You're not seeking out the right talent pool, or you're not seeking out the talent pool where you would find that, And unfortunately, the legacy that the Glenn Miller Orchestra holds in social settings is not something that a lot of people who aren't young, white, male, college educated musicians who are just looking for a gig, and they take advantage of that. They're trying to hire people right out of school so they don't have to pay them too much. It's
Yep.
it is the nature of the world,
The
and
business.
that was just it wore me down.
Yep. You're just done with it.
Yep. So quarantine came at a good time for me to just kind of reset and reconnect with my family, kind of reevaluate what I wanted to do next. It was a lot. I mean, just the travel alone was a lot. Feeling like I didn't necessarily have like a community that I was rooted in. Obviously, the band was a community in itself, and there are so many special memories from that experience of road life that I will never get anywhere else. But it works for some people long term, and I don't think it was going to be something that I could have done much longer, just because I like to nest and I like to be a part of a community, and I want to feel like I am making a measurable difference where I'm at.
Yep.
And that became very clear to me as we all sat at home and had to sit with ourselves and decide, do I like my life? Do I like who I am? And what's next, obviously.
Yeah. That's that. I feel like that's been such one of the unplanned, I guess. I mean, a pandemic is unplanned.
Right.
Definition of unplanned. But in my head, as things kept getting extended, I just thought, like, okay, I guess I'll have to take the energy and time and all the things that I've done prior to this, and I'm going to have to just turn that up when there's nothing happening. And then I got to a point where I'm like, I'm not getting paid a lot or at all right now. Like, what is, am I doing this just to seem busy? Am I doing this just because I feel like I have to work for this unemployment or the stimulus or something? Like, I have to totally justify something. And I got to a point, it took until probably like February when I was starting to, I restaurants were opening again, limited capacity. I got this residency at the listening room that was like twice a week. And I was just thinking, like, I don't need to, like, there's things I can tweak and there's things I can do that, like, everyone knows I'm busy. So it doesn't matter if I take less because I'm still perceived as being busy and I'm still working on stuff. And it's still, I don't need to, like, actually, like, I'm going to do, 16-hour days every day for 5 months. And it's like, that's what's going to, like, ruin a lot of things.
Yeah.
And it doesn't make sense.
Yeah. I mean, I find that very interesting. Do you feel like it's important to you to be perceived as busy?
Yeah, it's interesting because I feel like, and I joke about this, that I feel like I've been busy since really like 8th grade going into 9th grade. Yeah. I've just been busy because I'm taking private lessons and performing. I'm in high school. I'm involved in my church twice a week, and Sundays are like pretty much like church. You're doing, maybe you're on the worship band, you're in a service, then you have Sunday school, and you have youth group, and then I was part of Grand Rapids Initiative for Leaders, which met, once, sometimes twice, sometimes 3 times a week for different events. And that was kind of like supplemental church plus like a smidgening of certain, life skills, plus learning about, how to, organize, how to empower your community, how to, recognize things like, wage slavery, or like, all these problems with, systemic racism.
Mm-hmm.
And, be going to Grand Rapids City High School too. It was a very, involved, high performing school. So I've just been, I just got used to like, oh, I'm just always doing some kind of work, and people know that I do that. And that's how I get a lot of work, is just that people know I can get a lot of work done. And I've got to a point where it's like, I want to still have all my creative needs met and still feel like I'm doing the projects I want to do, but I don't have to like like you leave the water running, eventually the sink's going to overflow, like, and that's not good. It causes all that.
I love that analogy. I haven't heard that one yet.
Yeah.
I always hear like, you can't give from an empty cup, or you can't pour from an empty cup kind of thing. Because if you're using all of your energy to be busy and to do things all the time, you can't give it in cases of emergency, or when you yourself need like rest or care or whatever, that you need to take care of yourself. That was definitely something that I welcomed when quarantine hit. And there were definitely points in the time where I was just like laying on my bed like, oh God, what do I do today? Like, but at the same time, I had not had that opportunity since, like you said, since I was probably in like 7th or 8th grade.
Mm-hmm.
And I was so extracurricular out as a high schooler, and then in college with ensembles and practicing. And I even tried to do like some student organizations for a couple of years that I was involved in. And at a certain point it hits you, either it's a medical diagnosis, or if it's a family member who needs extra care or passes away, or whatever it may be. There are these things that we are recognizing now, especially at this point in our lives, that require us to slow down, that require us to maybe not always say yes, which is a culture that I definitely picked up in music school. Say yes, because you never know what opportunity it's going to lead to, or what connection it's going to make you. And that is such a good philosophy, and I still stand by it. And I am always staying curious and open when I do say yes. But I've found for myself, I'm like, I need this many hours of sleep, I need this much exercise, I need these foods in my diet to feel like I can give my best self to the things I say yes to. And if that means saying no to other things, then I have to. Which has, been a fun little mental exercise. Like, do I even deserve to be a musician? Do I deserve to be a working, creative person if I'm not eat, sleeping, and breathing my craft? And
right,
we're exploring that. And it's obviously not a thing that someone is deserving or undeserving of course, right. But it's the way that we want to craft our own lives around our own values.
Yes. And well, and especially like, I think I mentioned in a text how I've lost like 30 pounds so far, and I've my diet's changed, and I noticed like just the ability, like, even just moving is easier. Like the energy comes to like I have more energy, but then I also have a better sense of like, all right, I need to do these things in the morning. I need to get back into that semblance of a routine. Cause I realized a lot of the habits I picked up in college were,
unsustainable.
Like, yeah, it's totally like, all right, late night in the practice room, get up, right. Or I'm going to grab, something from the student center before I go to class. And, it's, I had a Cliff Bar and it's been 6 hours. Like, yeah. And then it's just like, it's all goes downhill from there.
Absolutely.
So that's been another thing I've had to, the mentalness of it, the retraining of like, yes, I can sleep. Yes, I can play this video game. Yes, I can like, I don't have to always be like buttoned up tight, especially when I know comparatively to like it, I've proven in multiple ways that, the general public, some people, if I explain it, they're like, oh, that's cool. And then other people are like, oh, you went to this thing. Oh,
Yeah.
you've worked with these people. You went and got your
Yeah.
master's. Like, I don't, I don't have to justify every second of my day. And I was thinking about that on Sunday because, I'm still in the middle of kidney stone fever and just waiting, that's all I could do. And Sunday, I wanted to connect my friend Caitlin, who I don't know if you know her, Caitlin Cusack at all.
I don't think so.
She's a Grand Valley grad. We went to school at the same time. She started in the piano studio and then she kind of shifted towards vocal and musical theater, and she suffered a concussion years ago, and it forced her to like she has these these big moments of brain fog. Like
Yeah.
it physically hurt to like perform, so she had to take like 2-3 years off of music. And she's now stepping back into, she understands how to manage these symptoms and things, and she wants
Right.
to step out and do stuff. And she's still, she's trained, so she sounds great, she's writing music. But we were gonna meet up with the engineer at Third Coast, Kevin, and he's got a sailboat. And he was like, well, what if we just did the meeting on the sailboat? And I'm like, that sounds great. And
Amazing.
and then as we were sailing, there was a waterfront concert, and like one of the engineers for the concert was emo, and I could see his hair pulled back with his hat. And in my head, I'm like, I was supposed to play a gig with emo, and I canceled it when I was like in the hospital, just like, I don't know how long this pain will last, so I'm just gonna
Oh my
cancel like
God.
4 gigs. and
Yeah.
and I had to have that moment of like, no, like if he really knows me, like he's not going to be upset that he sees me
Yeah.
on a boat. And you know like that was more rest, just being able to like move about and not have somebody be like, wait, why is he's supposed to be this, like this is what you. And I'm like, yeah.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's crazy. I also suffered a concussion my senior year of college and then
Ah,
um, kind of like doubled down on it and slipped a month later and hit my head again. So
it'll
that
all
was
reset.
cute. Yes. But then also I had COVID back in November, and
Oh.
from kind of talking to different doctors and stuff, and obviously long COVID symptoms are still being researched and discussed and considered. But I too suffer from brain fog sometimes, and I'll need people to repeat instructions for me at work, or I'll just ask so many questions. And I've started to offer it as a disclaimer when I meet new people or if I'm in new settings, where I just say, hey, I might need you to repeat things for me. This is why. Or I might need to take a break from the computer for this long every day because I literally can't function if I look at a screen for too long and things like that.
Right.
Um, but yeah, and that is something too where like I've had to remember that I trust myself, and I am the only person that I'm going to spend my whole life with.
Yep.
And if somebody is going to perceive a choice that I make to preserve, like for self-preservation, if somebody's going to perceive that as lazy or non-committal or whatever it may be, I have to let that go. And I have to trust myself and hope that they also trust me in a way, you know? And if they don't, then that's okay. It's a lost connection, but it's probably better for me in the long run because it might have been a headache to work with them for the rest of my life, kind of thing.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and that's part of why I started podcasting. And the premise of Mitten Backstage is kind of like I'm sharing, like, yes, we're talking about topics that you could just put as a banner for a podcast, like mental health or
Sure.
touring, or there's all these themes that go with podcasting.
Hmm.
But I guess the theme for this is like, this is kind of what, like if we were hanging out for an extended period of time, or if we were playing a show together, like this is kind of, we talk about music and life and, the ththings we learned and the things we're changing. I got
totally.
I got to see Alfredo Belcasser on Monday because he's just in town and he wanted to do a proper listening party with all, as many of the people who were involved on his album. And in those conversations, it was just nice to be like, oh yeah, so all these people had the same concerns or issues that I was having, and I just wasn't being communicative of while I was at Western.
Totally.
And it was great to be like, okay, I wasn't crazy. I just I was perceiving these things and not expressing them because I just didn't, I felt like I was stepping out of line, but it turns out everyone had similar thoughts.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's what we're more often than not going to find is there are so many more things that we all have in common and that we all see the same way than not, than differently.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, this was a great chat. It was great learning more about what you do and what, the experience of being in that kind of group and all this stuff.
Yeah, totally. An open book.
Yeah. Where should people, do you want them to find you? You got all those albums you still got to sell.
Yeah, if you're interested, obviously, you can check out my website, which is just my name, Truckenbrod.com. I don't do a ton of music things on the internet, but if you just want to follow me as a person, my Instagram is Hannah E. Truck. My middle name is Elizabeth. That's what E's for. And then you can also find my artist page on Facebook, which is not super active either, but that's just Hannah Truckenbrod. It's a vocalist page. And I'm also on TikTok. You can find me on TikTok. Again, I'm not posting a lot of music stuff. It's a lot more silly things. I've found my place in Taylor Swift TikTok community, as I am a huge Swiftie behind and in front of closed doors. So, this was so much fun, Dutcher. Thank you for having me, and I wish you nothing but the best. I hope I'll be up in West Michigan soon enough, and I just need to hear Earth Radio play live again. It is a need, not a want.
Yeah, and I'll let you know, we might be going to Chicago this fall.
Oh, that would be dope. Yes.
Yeah, we're trying to do, we blocked off 2 dates. I'm trying to make it 3. That would be sweet to just do a weekend and see all the folks we saw in 2019.
That would be awesome. I'll be there.
Awesome. Well, yeah, take it easy.
Take care. All right. Talk to you later. Bye.
Yeah. Hey, thanks so much for listening to this episode with Hannah Truckenbrod. I'm trying an outro while the credits roll. I want to thank all the Patreon members, all the subscribers, everyone who supports these podcasts with your ears, with your dollars, all those great things. And we will catch you next time on MItten Backstage.